Hello, BookTube, and I'm back with another list. I've been doing quite a few of these, but the last hours in my library, I did I showed 3 volumes of Lord Chesterfield's letters to his son, and a subscriber, Gerald's Bliss, um, it was great. He comments on a lot of stuff, and I see his comments everywhere. Great BookTube viewer, and he suggested he might have just said top 10 list of letter writers. Well, I couldn't confine it to 10. It was getting too out of hand here, but I'm gonna do everything. But and I've cut off at 27, and then I've got actually 10. I guess I'll call those honorable mentions. And the reason is that either I've not read any letters by them, but I definitely want to, and I know there's letter collections, but then there's other ones that I know there's letters for all these, but some of them are not published yet. So those are ones that are sort of hoping to be able to do, and it ranges all over, and there's reasons. I'll say the reasons for each one, more or less why. Um, and there's some that I've only read a few letters from, but I know that I want to read more. So in the main list, 27, I've read letters, either lots or some, of the author. Um, this will make you pleased, Gerald. Like you even said, Cicero. Yes, definitely. Cicero is the first. Again, these are birth dates to birth dates in the order. Cicero, from what I can find, is 106 BC to 43 BC. Obviously, these are probably going to be circa dates. But yeah, Cicero, letters to Atticus, and a bunch of. I just love Cicero. Period. His murder trials, everything. Cicero is one of my favorites of ancient writers, ancient classic writers. And then we got um, father and son here for next. Pliny the Elder, 23 AD to 79 AD, give or take, again. And then Pliny the Younger, 61 to 106 AD. And there's just letters back and forth. They, I think, like, I get the impression that they were writing letters, knowing that they were publishing them, but they're still fabulous. They're still fabulous. And then we move up into time, and I'm sure there's lots in between, but and few that I've read, but it's just like the list could go on and on. It's like essays that could just go forever. Is It's a family of letters rather than not a specific person. It's the Paston letters. They were written from more or less 1402 to 1509. They were a genteel sort of family, farmers in uh, Norfolk, I think it was. Yeah, Norfolk, yeah. And it's sort of day to day stuff, a little bit of politics in there, but just economic stuff, social things that were happening at the time. Some are better than others. I haven't read them all. There are a number of dishes, but I don't know if all of them have ever been published in full. I don't know. There's probably a few. There might be 1,000 in some letters, I think. But what I've read, I've thoroughly enjoyed. And then we move on up to the 17th century. Madame de Sévigné. Sévigné. Butchering the translation. I mean the pronunciation. I'm sure. 1629 to 1696. She was a prolific letter writer, but I think most of them have disappeared, and most of them are to her daughter, and a variety of things like surprising the things that she wrote about, but the ones that I've read, I used to have a collection, and I've really enjoyed. Another one that I actually put on an essay one, but these are letters. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, 1689 to 1762. Um, like I guess her famous sort of letters collection, if you want to use that, is the letters from the consulate in Turkey. But she talks about, traveling around their local customs, her impressions, there's family matters, and then traveling around into Europe as well. I really, really enjoy those. And then, well, Lord Chesterfield, I think so that's kind of cool. They're both together. The two that were on my essay list is Lord Chesterfield, 1694 to 1773. For the most part, it's the letters to Dear Boy, his illegitimate son, basically telling him how to be a gentleman and setting him tasks to do either literary or other things, and to write back to him stuff. So to me, like I said, they're essays, but they are letters. So they rightly, I think, have in both. Now, I'm not differentiating. It's a husband and wife team here with their letters. I'm counting them together because they've been published in a massive multi-volume collection, which I've referred to, I think, before. Is Thomas and Jane Welsh Carlyle, or just Jane Carlyle, 17. Thomas Carlyle is 1795 to 1881, and Jane Carlyle is 1801 to 1866. Now, I've got, I think, 12 volumes, the first 12 volumes of the complete set. And I think they're pretty well complete now. Um, I think they are. I think they could be very well complete. Um, Sorry, I just thought of two other authors to put on the list here while I'm doing this, but we'll get to those. They're going to be out of order because I don't know the date, but I'll list everything down. They'll be order of birth dates. Sorry, brain. So yeah, Thomas and Jane Carlyle, like their letters, like Jane's letters, like they're full of domestic issues of servants and all sorts of stuff. So very, very interesting minutia, sort of day to day life of keeping a household and having guests over and all this kind of stuff. And Thomas Carlyle's some of that too. Philosophical, historical things that he writes about, just endlessly fascinating um, letters. And I've thought of a third one, so it's going to be 30. Sorry, I should have added with this, Charles Lamb's letters, and even his sister Mary Lamb. So we'll class those two together because they've been in things. So we'll do those now. Charles Lamb and Mary Lamb, his sister. Uh, Thomas Carlo didn't care for Lamb that much, but anyway, again, there's the letters to friends, family, and Mary Lamb's letters, a variety of topics, but a lot of domestic material and stuff like that. And I think there's stuff that sort of hints to her at times mental instability that I remember, or I might be mixing it up with knowing reading a biography of her. But yeah, so yeah, I'll throw them in here because they're around that period. Uh, okay, and then we'll move on to Mary Shelley. Her letters. I've only read a few, and I do want to read a lot more. I've only read a few letters. I don't know if they've all been published, but just fascinating stuff. Especially we'll see other ones that are connected to this. Their summer in Geneva with Byron and Shelley and Claire Claremont. Um, so let's move ahead to David Livingston, 1813 to 1873. As you know, his journals and everything are fabulous, but his letter collections are great as well. There's a 2 volume, I think it's just 2 volumes, yeah. Family letters that are fabulous, and there's so much more that hasn't been published either. That would be great. He was sort of explorer of Africa, walked back and forth across Africa, and died in the pursuit of that. And his sort of dispatches and writing and railing against slavery actually helped, make blockades and actually stop the slavery from in Ivory. He did help with that. He's been attributed to the person who actually stopped it, but there were other factors happening at the time. Another great one is Gertrude Bell. She lived from 1868 to 1926. She was an archaeologist, uh, traveled throughout the Middle East, and she knew many languages, and she actually was instrumental in setting up the museum in Iraq. Um, and she spied sort of for the British government at times, and she knew more about the politics and everything, and she was there. Sort of, she wrote I think you would call, I think it was a sort of a white paper of what to do after after uh, after the First World War. So that was very interesting. And then I'll add the other two here because they're sort of around the same period. Mark Twain's letters, I've found those endlessly fascinating, the ones I've read. Talking about their humorous at times, there's some publishing information which I really like. And then also Charles Darwin's letters. I've only read a few of those, but I think they all be endlessly fascinating. I know where I can get a set that's like, I don't know, 18 volumes long, but I could never afford it. Then we go to Rainier Maria Rilke, 1875 to 1926, and his letters to a young poet, I think it is. Those just by themselves are fabulous, and I'm sure there's other letters that I haven't read that I really like, because now there was volumes. They found the letters back to him, not just his to the young poet, and that even is more fascinating when you get the back and forth. Uh, P.G. Wodehouse, 1881 to 1975. I don't know what else to say about it. There's a huge volume that's been put out, and some of them are very short and don't really say much, but there's great letters like to Jerome Kern talking about writing and just all sorts of stuff. Just the whole 9 yards, and he's very witty in them as well, or can be. Letters by Virginia Woolf, 1882 to 1941. Now, I haven't read that many, but I want to read more. And the ones that I've read a small collection in the past, and they were fabulous. So she's definitely on the list. So that's why I say there's some that I've read lots, and some that I've only read a few. But I know the ones that I've read, I definitely want to read more. And I think the few that I've read are good enough to say that they belong on a list like this for me. Maxwell Perkins, 1884 to 1947. He was an editor at, the publisher, just a New York publisher. I was going to say Simon and Schuster. Well, anyway, no, I don't think this is a brand about. Anyway, he was an editor. I've gone blank on it. A big editor. He edited Thomas Wolfe, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, what's her name from the Cross Creek, the Yearling. I can't think of her name, but anyway, I've got a small collection of his letters, like to these authors, and talking about how to change things and just chit chatting everyday things. Like he was very personal with a lot of them, and I'd love to read a lot more. And they're just I find the minutia at times about publishers and authors talking about their work endlessly fascinating, and he's definitely up there. And then we got Lord Byron's letters. He lived from 1888 to 1824, and again that goes back to the Geneva thing. And I've got a collection of his letters. I've not read them all, but again, I am not sure if I want his letters all round, but specifically to deal with that and other things to sort of get a background for it. And then we got T.E. Lawrence, 1888 to 1935, which again, he sort of goes with Gertrude Bell in the sense of they did a lot of stuff that was similar. An archaeologist, explorer, soldier, and there's a big collection of letters that are just endlessly fascinating. And I also got, this was kind of interesting. There's letters to T.E. Lawrence, which is quite interesting. Then we move on to T.S. Eliot, 1888 to 1965. He was on my poet list, and he was sort of editor at Faber and Faber. They're putting out volumes. I got like seven volumes of his letters. I don't know how many there's going to be. It could be up into the 20s because he lived to 1965, 1888 to 65, and I think they're only up to like the 30s or 40s, and they're huge honking books. And again, I haven't read them all, but I find them very interesting because there's a lot to do with the publishing industry and Faber and Faber and everything like that. And I find that stuff fascinating. And then we go to another publisher, Victor Gollancz, 1883 to 1967. Now, the only letters that I've read of his are in the George Orwell collection of Complete, because they're the back and forth, and again, endlessly fascinating as a publisher, and I'd love to read more of his. Then we go to Freya Stark, 1893 no, sorry, 1893 to 1993. She lived till 100. She was an explorer, travel writer, photographer throughout the Middle East and other places too. But I think there's like a 6-volume set of her letters. Oh, I'd really, really love to have those. And again, I've only read a few, but I like her enough. She's written, like, I think she published probably at least two dozen or more books during her lifetime, because she lived to 100. But this is sort of, she lived. She's doing this in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Well, maybe not so much in the 40s. I can't remember now, but the letters are just the ones that I've read are fascinating. And then we get to George Orwell, because I've got all his letters in this 20. I keep looking up because it's on the wall over there. 20 volume, 21 volume. And I've mentioned that there's a new biography, or an updated biography by D.J. Taylor. And I know that there's some new letters that have been, not new, but newly discovered letters that have been found. And as far as I know, they have not been published in a book yet. But I'm sure he'll use those, and it'd be nice if there was like a little appendix, if there's not too many, with those letters in the new one. I'm sort of hoping that it gives some other insight into that. And that's why, like I say, 20 volumes, but there's a 21st volume that was put out by that editor, Peter Davison, that has sort of, things that were found since the publication of the 20 volumes. So it was like, so it's actually 21 volumes. If I didn't say 1903 to 1950, George Orwell lived. Evelyn Waugh, 1903 to 1966. Prolific letter writer. I've got many volumes of his, because there's collections of back and forth letters too, and that's where we get to the next one. Nancy Mitford, 1904 to 1973. They had a friendship in letters that are just fabulous, back and forth. And there's a whole volume of those, and there's other collections as well. And then there's a collection of his letters, but not sort of all there. All together. I don't know. There might be a complete collection, but I like the ones that are the back and forths. And Nancy Mitford too. I have a slim volume of her letters. I think it's a Curzon Bookshop or something like that. It's with somebody else, and they're fabulous as well. No surprise for this. For the next two, actually, Clifford D. Simak, 1904 to 1988. Now, probably this should have more gone on to the other list, but I have read some letters, so very few. But I want to see more, and I know they haven't been published. So in a sense, they should have been on the other one, but they're definitely. They are for sure, I should say, that I want to read them because it's Clifford Simak. And then the next, Louise Brooks, 1906 to 1985, and I've got one collection to a younger author that she was writing, and these are the back and forth letters, and I find them fascinating. I find her fascinating, so therefore any letters by her. But I've read fully that volume, so she deserves a place on the list here. Then we got John W. Campbell, 1910 to 1971. He was a science fiction writer, first of all, under various pseudonyms, but also editor of Astounding, and then changed the name to Analog from 1938. I think he took over late 37, but he didn't really have his, or was it 38 and it was 1930, somewhere around there anyway. The memory of dates sometimes slips me. But he died in harness basically in 1971. But there's two big volumes of his letters to authors talking about writing, and again, this goes to the publisher, and it's just endlessly fascinating to me. The bad thing about those two volumes, though, is there's no index for to try to find stuff. That's a bit of a pain. It'd be wonderful that letter collections, when they're annotated, to tell about what they're talking about or to reference to who, because you don't say to someone, you don't put the full name in and give the reference to someone who knows what you're talking about, because it's sort of a shortcut. But as you're reading it, if you sometimes don't know these things, or things like they've asked for something and like, was that ever followed up? Like John W. Campbell wants so and so to write stuff. Did it ever happen? Did he ever get anything basically for this, and how did it work out? Things like that. And then the last one on the list here, the most recent is Sylvia Plath. I've got one or two volumes of. I've got her diaries as well, and then I don't know how to well, they're great, but they're fraught. Like there's a lot of stuff in them. That's what I say. Like with their mental state at times and things like that. But I haven't read them all the way through. But anyway, that's the list. So that's 30 now. When what did I add? Who did I add? I forgot now. Mark Twain. Oh, Charles Lamb, Mary Lamb, Mark Twain, and Charles Darwin. And there are tons of other. There's so many letter writers that are good, and it's like, and there's so many others that I've never seen collections of, so they're not on here, even though I know I would like them. And again, it's like, how big can I make the list? These are ones that I have read, and it wasn't because I've purposely didn't search for other people. It's just because they never came across my radar. Or I read something and tried to find letters and never did. So let's get this. I'll call this honorary mentions. Everybody has probably seen by now my detestable authors video where I've had Jane Austen on there, and I've read all her fiction, and I've been told about her letters, which I'm very interested to read her letters. So again, this is something I've never read, her letters. And then we go Percy B. Shelley. Jane Austen lived from 1775 to 1870. Percy B. Shelley, 1792 to 1822. Again, because the connection with Mary Shelley, which I'm interested in the writing of Frankenstein and The Summer in Geneva, that would be great. And then as well as Claire Clairmont, the cousin of Mary Shelley, 1798 to 1879. Percy B. Shelley, 1792 to 1822. I'm not sure if I said it. But Claire Clairmont, there are collections of her letters, but they're extremely expensive. I've never read any. And I don't think I've ever read any by Shelley. I don't think so. And then we go to Sir Richard Francis Burton, the Explorer, 1821 to 1890. If I've read anything, it'll be snippets or little bits in biographies. I don't even know. I have looked in the past and I could never find. I don't think there are any letters that are published, and I don't even know if they exist still. But he would be somebody that I would want to read. And then we go to John Hanning Speke, 1827 to 1864, another explorer. I don't know if he definitely wrote letters, but and I'm sure they're around, but have they been published? They probably have not. Amelia Edwards, 1831 to 1892. She was an author. She wrote some ghost stories, other things. And she was an Egyptologist. She set up the Egyptian Exploration Fund. I think that's what it's called. I always get um, sometimes backwards on this. But I'd love to read her letters. Henry James, 1843 to 1916. There's like 5 volumes of his letters. If I've read anything, it's just snippets. I've never, I don't think, read, but I love his writing, so I'm sure I'd find his letters endlessly fascinating. Oscar Wilde, 1854 to 1900s. I've got a collection of his letters. I don't know if I've ever actually read any of his letters. I've got the collection, but again, this is somebody that I like and I would want to read. Mary Kingsley, 1862 to 1900. She traveled and explored a little bit in West Africa. Sorry, I'm getting my directions here. And she's written 2 great books of those. I'm sure she must have wrote letters. I don't think they're. Oh, I know. Sorry, no, I do know she wrote letters. There's an archive with her letters. I don't think they've ever been published, and that's somebody that I would like to read. And then we got Ernest Hemingway, another. Well, it's bookended here. Jane Austen, and then Ernest Hemingway, 1899 to 1961. One of my detestable authors. But there's a whole series of letters come out. He corresponded with a lot of authors, and that's where I think I'm sure these would be great. And like I say, any explorer or anything like that, I'd have interest in. Authors, publishing, any author that I like, I'd find their letters, I'm sure, interesting. So there's 40 letter writers out of thousands. But we're almost at 30 minutes, so I'll end it there. And I'm sure there'll be more. Take care, BookTube.